Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the hot grill summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
Hi, I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter. On this episode, I've collected a few questions from my clinic that I think you've all wondered about. We've got a question about melatonin for kids with jet lag, when is the right time to start kids in team sports, and what to do with your child who has tics. You know, the kind where you blink your eyes or shrug, not the insect. For those, you just pull them off your skin. I don't think that would be a very interesting segment. Or maybe it would. I'm going to look into that. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kid's health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. Here's our first question.
So I'm going to Hawaii next month and wanted to ask if I should give melatonin to my 3-year-old to help with time change or jet lag.
Melatonin is safe, and it's often very effective for jet lag in young children. In this case, Hawaii is 2 hours earlier from this family who lives on the West Coast. So if her child usually goes to bed at 7:30 at night, he's going to be tired around 5:30 in Hawaii. So I don't think she's going to need the melatonin on the trip, but she might need it when they come back home. Melatonin is a hormone secreted by the pineal gland in the brain, and we know it increases when it's dark outside and decreases when the retinas in your eyes are exposed to light. Melatonin is released from the brain into the cerebrospinal fluid. And I didn't know this, but I just learned it also helps to regulate the menstrual cycle. Every medication and supplement has a different amount of time until it peaks in the blood. We call that the half-life. And it depends on the absorption in the gastrointestinal tract and a couple of other factors. The level of melatonin in the blood will peak 1 hour after you've taken it. So if you want to move your child's bedtime up after a major time change, you want to actually give it several hours earlier, like 2 to 4 hours before you want them to go to sleep, because melatonin can actually shift their natural circadian rhythm earlier. But for jet lag, you just want to give it about 30 minutes before you want the child to go to bed. The typical doses are going to be 1 to 2 milligrams in preschool kids, so like age 2 to 5. And 2 to 3 milligrams in school-age kids, so age 5 to 12, and then teenagers can take 5 milligrams. You don't want to use melatonin on an ongoing basis in a regular healthy kid because it can cause some side effects like mild daytime drowsiness, and it doesn't do anything to help make a kid stay asleep during the night. It only helps with sleep onset or falling asleep. There are some kids with autism or ADHD who may need melatonin on a regular basis, and they can use a dose up to 10 milligrams sometimes, but you want to check with your doctor for that. I do know that parents try diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, and that drug crosses the blood-brain barrier and binds to receptors in the brain to cause sedation or sleepiness. Parents try to use this to get their kids to sleep on an airplane flight, and it's not always a great idea. There are other antihistamines like Zyrtec and Claritin that are not sedating, so don't confuse it and use those. I don't recommend Benadryl for trying to get a kid to sleep on an airplane or when you arrive in a destination because it does have a lot of side effects. And even worse, young kids can have what we call a paradoxical reaction. That means the opposite is going to happen. So if you want your kid to be sleeping, they're going to be wired and crazy and running around. So you want to try the Benadryl before you use it for getting them to sleep if you think you want to try this. One of the biggest problems with melatonin is that it's not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. There was this really great study in Canada a couple of years ago where they took 31 supplements and they used fancy liquid chromatography. I don't remember what that is, but some of you might know what it is if you're smart chemists or scientists. They looked at the melatonin content in all of these supplements and found that the amount on the label varied greatly from what was actually in the pill. It varied from having 83% less melatonin up to 478% more melatonin that was on the label. So for example, if a pill said it had 1.5 milligrams in it, it could have actually had 9 milligrams of melatonin, which would make you really sleepy. The amount of melatonin also varied a ton within the same brand. So if they took 2 bottles of the exact same stuff, they saw variations up to 466%. So some 2 milligram tablets had 8 milligrams of melatonin in them. They also found serotonin in a lot of these samples, which can cause an overdose. And this is the one time I'll tell you it's okay to go and Google Serotonin Syndrome. It's pretty scary. The most reliable melatonin products were found to have the fewest ingredients. So that's what you want to look for. You want to look on the label and see that it only contains melatonin and some single filler agent. And you can always check qualitysupplements.org website for recommendations, and I'll list those in the show notes. The one I do recommend is called Natrol. It comes as a 5 milligram dissolvable tablet, so you can give it to a kid and you can break it in half to give them about 2.5 milligrams. On to our next question.
My son Castiel is 4, and we had signed him up for soccer shots to see if he'd be interested. And every time we took him, instead of playing and listening to the coach, he would run out into the middle of the field and he would fall down, and then he'd poke his head up and say, "I'm okay." And that's when we pulled him out of soccer shots, because why are we paying for him to run and fall on a field? So my question, Dr. Hunter, is when is the right time to start your children in team sports?
We know there are lots of benefits to team sports, but if you start your kid when they aren't developmentally ready, they are going to be really frustrated, and you as a parent may also be quite frustrated and out a bit of money too. So think of introducing sports the same as learning to walk. Kids need to learn trunk control first, and then they learn to sit, and then they might crawl a little, and then they pull to stand before they actually walk. And that's what you need to do with sports too. It needs to be a gradual, developmental, staged attempt at getting them to be more physically active. And it's not just about motor development. Kids also have to develop balance. They have to develop their attention span and the visual ability to track a moving object, which is actually a skill that is not fully mature even by age 5. So for preschool kids, up to age maybe 4 or 5, you want to focus on giving kids the opportunity to practice the basic skills of sports. Things like running, swimming, tumbling, throwing, and catching. And you don't need a class for this. There are plenty of classes, and you can look for one, but you really want to encourage them to explore on their own. So if you're looking for a class for your young child in preschool to participate in, ask the class if they give them time to explore on their own. And the other thing is that kids need to be able to copy other people. So look for a class with very little instruction and a lot more show and tell and a lot of playtime. And it's important for parents to participate also. Once a child hits elementary school, they're not quite ready for concepts like strategy in a game or even teamwork. I mean, no 4-year-old or 5-year-old really wants to share a ball. And they often don't have great hand-eye coordination. So even if you have a kid who you think is really physically fit and active, they may not have that fine hand-eye coordination to be able to do a lot of the team sports. If they can kick a ball, it is okay to start them in soccer. And if they can swing a baseball bat, you may want to consider t-ball or baseball. But you also could consider trying tennis before baseball to make sure they are good at swinging. And some other good options at this age are martial arts, gymnastics, skiing, ice skating. And for skiing, you want to make sure that your child is developmentally ready in terms of their physical ability. So they need to be able to bring their toes together and push their heels out to make a wedge, or they're not going to be able to make a pizza on the slopes. If you're ready to start your elementary school child in team sports, you want to make sure you ask the coaches if rules are going to be flexible, because you want everyone on the team to have a chance to participate. You also want to make sure that the coach has a real focus on skill building and learning new skills and emphasizes making an effort, not on winning. You want the coach to cheer your child on because they've been trying and learning new skills. You also want to check that equipment is modified. Maybe they need smaller balls, a smaller field, a shorter game time, fewer players. And you want to make sure that the kids get a chance to try all the different positions on the team. Once a child is age, like say 10 to 12, they're probably ready for more complex sports. And at this point, you can really focus on skill development and having fun and not necessarily on competition. If you ask kids this age, they really would rather play more on a losing team than less on a winning team. And at this age, you also need to consider puberty. So is your child small and the other kids have already gone through puberty? If that's the case, you may want to keep them in something like a racket sport, swimming, or martial arts, and not necessarily on a team where everyone's going to be bigger than them. And kids who are actively going through puberty often will be a lot more clumsy and uncoordinated, so you may want to keep that in mind as well. And one of the most important things is that you never want your child to play one single sport all year round until after puberty. If your child hasn't gone through puberty yet, their growth plates are still open, and if they're doing the same sport and making the same movements for many months on end, they're much more likely to be injured. So if you want your child to be a baseball star in college, they need to play lots of different sports when they're younger, because that's going to make them a stronger athlete, and they're not going to have injuries that prevent them from playing their primary sport. One last thought is that organized athletics may not be of interest to your child, and that's okay. The most important thing and the goal here is that we want our kids to learn the benefits of lifelong fitness.
Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the hot grill summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
My 4-year-old son is in preschool, and the teachers let us know they were concerned that he had been blinking a lot and then had started to do some throat clearing. We went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him with Tourette's. The school was also recommending that we use an occupational therapist who would come into the class, observe him, and then also provide some targeted therapies. I'm curious whether you think this is the right approach.
It's really premature to diagnose Tourette's in this child. I know this diagnosis can be really scary. Even if you just notice that your child has new tics, parents are really worried. They worry whether the tics will ever go away, and they also worry if it means something more serious might be on the horizon. But tics are almost always inconsequential. A lot of kids do end up seeing a neurologist, and they really don't need to. Your pediatrician can help you understand your child's tics. I talked with child neurologist Dr. Michael Zimbrick from University of California, San Diego, to ask about his experience. I started by asking him, what are tics?
Tics are also considered behaviors that happen in normal kids, and in and of themselves, they are not harmful. But the most common tics that we see might be eye blinking, tight eye blinking, or eye winking. And there's lots of variations on the theme: little head shakes, jerks of the head, scrunching of the nose, grimacing. And then there's vocal tics, so repetitive sniffs, coughs, hums, or sometimes words.
I think of these as involuntary movements, not involuntary. They're not truly involuntary because a child can stop them from happening. They can be suppressed. It's just really uncomfortable for them to try not to have the tic. Technically, this child has what we call provisional tic disorder. We call it that because we don't know how long the tics are going to last, and typically, most tics go away within a year. In order to diagnose Tourette Syndrome, you have to have had the tics for at least 1 year, and you have to have one motor tic and one vocal tic, and that's just not the case here.
Tics happen in a lot of kids. Somewhere between 10 and 15% of boys have tics. Somewhere around 2 to 5% of girls have tics. And they are things that can vary quite a bit in their appearance. They'll start as one thing and change to another thing. And so when they change, parents tend to worry. They think, oh my gosh, it's something new, something's getting worse, something bad is happening, something bad is going on.
It's common for tics to change over time or to go away and come back. And this is to be expected. This is normal. So don't worry. I asked Dr. Zimbrick how to handle this.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that parents can try to do, apart from simply understanding that their child has tics, and maybe they're doing that with the help of their healthcare provider, pediatrician or nurse practitioner, or what have you, is trying to understand whether those tics really are bothersome, painful, or impairing for the child who has them. And there's different ways in which tics can really be bothersome. Some examples I can think of are, let's say you've got a child who really likes to read, and he or she is reading, but they're always blinking their eyes like this. They feel this incredible impulse to blink their eyes over and over, and they're always losing their place as they're reading. So reading then is no longer that much fun. It's really frustrating, and that's unfortunate, and we don't want that. Of course, when kids have tics where they're moving their head and neck all around, eventually they'll probably get some neck pain or a headache, and that's obviously bothersome. Sometimes teachers or classmates might be bothered by the tics. That's not a determinant of whether we're going to put a child on medication for the tics. We try to educate people. We try to help them adapt to it or understand it, rather than treat a child with medication, for example, because of the way it bothers somebody else. We try to avoid that scenario. But if you've got a child who really has, honest to goodness, chronic tics, which means they've been there for more than a year, what the typical scenario is that they'll wax and they'll wane, they'll evolve, they'll change from one thing to another until sometime in their mid to late teen years, at which time the tics will become a lot less and they might go away entirely, right? And that's usually what we see. There definitely are adults who have tics, but there are more kids who have tics because most kids outgrow them at that point, sometime in their teenage years.
The best thing you can do for your child is to stay calm and avoid drawing attention to the tic. First, figure out if it bothers the child at all, or alternatively, if they're being bullied for their tics. You also want to make sure that you take the child back to the doctor if the tics last more than a year or are becoming far more severe. Parental anxiety about tics can backfire by making them worse. If you draw attention to a tic that a child is not worrying about, parents can inadvertently make the child feel self-conscious and concerned, which in turn can exacerbate the tic. We try so hard as parents to do the right thing for our kids, and whether it's just letting them play, letting them follow their own circadian rhythm, or ignoring their sometimes really weird tics, sometimes we just need to let our kids be kids. And that's a lot easier when we have a little knowledge. Send me your questions or look for the Ask Dr. Wendy box at drwendyhunter.com. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more.